January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger, it just comes apart, 74 seconds into its flight. We all saw it happen, live on TV. It was this huge national trauma, a tragedy we felt like we understood completely. But what if a really important part of that story, something we've believed for decades, was just plain wrong? All right, so let's get right into it. Fast forward to May of 2024. A New York Times review comes out for a new book about the disaster, and it drops this absolute bombshell of a statement. I mean, just like that, it completely flipped the script on 40 years of understanding what happened to those 7 astronauts. And it didn't stop there. The review made this incredibly specific, just horrifying claim. It said there was recorded audio of the pilot, Mike Smith, conscious for that whole 2.5-minute fall to the ocean, counting down the seconds to his own death. As you can imagine, that detail just exploded online. A Reddit community that's all about space history, well, they went wild with it. I mean, that's a chilling thought, right? And it brings us to the core question we're going to unpack here. After all these years, after all the official investigations, could something this huge, this grim, have just been sitting there waiting to be discovered in a new book?
So, this claim was so explosive that of course the internet did its thing. You had space buffs, you had historians, and they all immediately started digging. They were like, okay, let's compare this new revelation to what we know is the official record.
But here's the thing, and this is what's so interesting. For people who are really into space history, the idea that the crew survived the initial breakup, that wasn't news. Not at all. Like this one Reddit user pointed out, we've actually known that since the original Rogers Commission report, way back in '86. Yeah, if you go back to that original report, the evidence is all there, and it's pretty grim. See, the crew cabin itself was built like a tank. It's separated from the rest of the shuttle, but stayed mostly in one piece. And inside, investigators found that several of the crew's emergency air packs, they'd been manually turned on. They also found switches on pilot Mike Smith's control panel that had been flipped, like he was trying to get the power back. And that's exactly why their official cause of death has always been impact with the ocean, not the explosion. So let's be super clear about this. The established fact is that the crew was alive after the shuttle came apart. The big, shocking, new claim was about them being provably conscious until the very end, based on this supposed recorded audio. And that is a huge, huge difference. But to really get a handle on all this, we've got to rewind and look at what went wrong in the first place. Because really, when you peel it all back, the story of Challenger is a perfect storm of insane pressure, of warnings that were just flat out ignored, and one single catastrophic failure. And at the heart of that failure, something called O-rings. I mean, they're basically just giant rubber gaskets, seals that sit in the joints of those huge, solid rocket boosters on the side. But their job was absolutely critical. They had to contain this 5,000-degree, high-pressure gas from the rocket motor. If they didn't, well, that gas would escape like a blowtorch. So the day before the launch, Florida gets hit with this crazy cold snap. And the engineers at the company that made the boosters, Morton Thiokol, they started freaking out. They knew those rubber O-rings would get stiff and brittle in the cold and wouldn't seal right. So that night, they get on a conference call with NASA and they say, point blank, do not launch. But NASA managers, they were under a ton of pressure to keep the shuttle flying on schedule, and they pushed back, hard. And in what has become one of the most infamous moments in engineering history, the managers at Thiokol caved. They overruled their own experts and told NASA it was a go for launch. The next morning, there was literally ice on the launch pad. But Challenger lifted off anyway, and just 74 seconds later, exactly what the engineers feared happened. The cold O-rings failed, a jet of flame shot out, cut through the external fuel tank, and the whole thing was ripped apart by the sheer force of flying through the atmosphere. Okay, so that brings us right back to the central mystery here. We have the history, right? We know about the O-rings. We know the crew survived the breakup. But what about the supposed recorded audio? What did this new book actually reveal? The folks on Reddit were basically on a mission to answer one simple question. Did the author, a respected journalist, actually find some smoking gun, some piece of evidence that the massive official investigation had either missed or maybe even covered up? And here's the twist. The person who started the whole Reddit thread, the original poster, was so curious they just went and bought a Kindle copy of the book to find the source. And what did they find? Absolutely nothing. Zip. The book doesn't say anything about recorded audio after the breakup. It makes no claim about Mike Smith being conscious until impact. So the answer was suddenly crystal clear. This huge, sensational, new information, it wasn't a hidden historical fact. It was just a mistake, a big one. The book reviewer had apparently taken the known facts that the crew survived and spun them into this dramatic, completely unproven story. Mystery solved. But that still leaves us with a pretty deep question, doesn't it? Why did this fake story catch on so quickly? Why did it resonate with so many people? And I think it's because it speaks to how fascinated we are with the human side of this tragedy, with the incredible professionalism of that crew. As that online discussion kept going, something really cool happened. People started sharing these mantras, these sayings from their world of pilots. One person shared what their dad, a pilot, always said: in an emergency, you never stop working the problem. And then someone else chimed in with a similar one, something their pilot friend actually kept taped to his instrument panel. In case of emergency, fly the damn plane. And that really is the core of it, right? It's what every pilot, every astronaut is trained to do. You keep flying. You keep trying to solve the problem. You never, ever give up. And this is why the real facts of the story are actually so much more powerful than the fiction. Think about it. Those flipped switches on the control panel, those activated air packs, they're not just grim details. They are a testament. They're proof that in the middle of an absolute catastrophe, the Challenger crew was doing their job. They were working the problem. They were trying to fly the damn plane right until the very end. So, where does that leave us? I think it shows that we don't need to make things up to understand the weight of this tragedy. Maybe the real story, the true, factual one, about professionals acting with unbelievable courage in an impossible situation, is actually the most powerful tribute we can pay to their memory. Maybe the truth is what really honors them the most.